All right, so we're ready to dive deep into this review of Katie Says Goodbye, a 2016 film that sounds like it's going to be pretty intense. We're talking about the Arizona desert and a young waitress, Katie, who's working towards a dream of going to San Francisco.
Sounds pretty typical so far, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like a classic coming-of-age kind of thing.
Exactly, but here's where things take a turn.
Oh, lay it on me.
To get to San Francisco, she turns to sex work to try and fund her dream.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's definitely not your typical coming-of-age story.
Right. So what really struck me reading this review was how they frame Katie's optimism. Because it's not just, this naive hope for a better future. It's almost presented as a psychological defense mechanism. Like she's using it to cope with this really, really harsh reality.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if it's genuine or if it's, like you said, some kind of coping mechanism.
Right.
The review calls her sweet-natured, but then also kind of hints that maybe her sunny outlook is just covering up some deeper pain.
Exactly. And that makes you think, what internal struggles is she battling that we don't see? And how is that going to play out visually in the film?
Yeah, for sure. The review mentions intimate camera work and how it focuses on Katie's subtle expressions. So I'm imagining like a lot of close-ups.
Yeah.
Where you can really see like the cracks beneath the surface of her optimism.
Oh, absolutely. Like imagine a close-up where she's forcing a smile for a customer.
Right.
But her eyes are betraying this like flicker of despair. It's those little moments,
Yeah.
those subtle moments where I think we're really going to understand the weight of everything she's carrying.
Yeah. Like visually, film can just convey so much without having to say anything.
Right.
It's amazing. The review also talks about the Arizona landscape almost as a character itself.
Oh, yeah.
Symbolizing those feelings of being trapped.
Oh, for sure. Think about a desert. Vast, empty, unforgiving.
Yeah.
It can represent isolation, lack of opportunity. And the reviewer also mentioned this muted color palette, which further reinforces that feeling of being trapped.
Right. Because muted colors often have that sense of bleakness and emotional draining, almost like a reflection of Katie's own internal world.
Exactly.
So we're seeing this interplay already between like the psychology and the visuals.
Yeah.
And then we have this character, Bruno, a mechanic and ex-convict, who, according to the review, adds a whole other layer of complexity to Katie's story.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
The review describes him as having this intensity and guarded vulnerability.
Well, that combination right there, intensity and vulnerability, suggests to me someone who's grappling with past trauma.
Makes sense.
It's almost like an archetype,
Yeah.
That brooding, wounded figure who is drawn to the light.
Right.
And Katie represents that. Katie represents hope. Their relationship could be really fascinating to watch unfold on screen, like how trauma can shape our connections with others.
Yeah, especially when there's this craving for intimacy. But like you said, maybe past trauma is preventing that. Makes total sense. The review hints that Bruno's past might actually be a source of conflict between them. And I'm curious to see how that plays out.
Me too.
Also, they mentioned that Olivia Cooke's performance as Katie is the beating heart of the film. I mean, that is some high praise right there.
It is. But it sounds well-deserved. From the review, it seems like Cooke is able to portray both vulnerability and resilience,
Right.
which are key elements of Katie's character. The reviewer highlights how she captures this quiet strength of Katie, suggesting it's not this outward, showy display of strength, but something much more nuanced and internal.
Yeah. It makes me think about what archetype Katie embodies.
Yeah.
Is she the innocent? Or is she the rebel? Is she a caregiver?
It's a great question.
Or maybe it's all three.
Maybe.
And how does that archetype, whatever it may be, contribute to the overall message of the film?
Yeah, I think those are all really important questions to consider, and it'll be interesting to see how her archetype, whatever it is, clashes with the realities of her environment.
Speaking of contrasting elements, the review praises the film for its documentary-like quality.
Okay.
Which seems at odds with what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
The symbolic landscape, the potential archetypes. How do those styles even go together?
That's where the director's skill comes into play. So think about the elements of documentary filmmaking. Handheld camera work, natural lighting, a focus on raw emotion. All of that creates a sense of authenticity.
Right.
But then that rawness is juxtaposed with, like you said, the metaphorical weight of the desert and Katie's symbolic journey. And it all works together, realism and symbolism.
To create a really powerful experience.
Exactly.
Wow. So it's like the director's trying to ground those symbolic elements in reality.
Yeah.
It's not just abstract ideas.
Yeah.
It's these ideas woven into the lives of these characters.
Right.
This review also mentions lingering scenes,
Okay.
which makes me think about the pacing. Is this a slow burn? Is it about soaking in the atmosphere?
I think so. I think the pacing is deliberate. The director wants us to really fully experience everything Katie's going through right alongside her.
Right.
And that slower pace could also be a form of social commentary, forcing the viewer to confront these realities that maybe they're not used to seeing.
The uncomfortable reality.
Exactly.
Okay. So it sounds like Katie Says Goodbye might not be for the faint of heart. The review does acknowledge that the film's bleak tone and the unflinching portrayal of hardship could be a little bit too much for some viewers.
Yeah.
But for those who are willing to go there.
The review suggests that it ultimately offers a hopeful message.
Hopeful. Really.
Yeah.
But given everything we've talked about, the bleakness, the symbolism of being trapped, the gritty realism, where does hope even fit in?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
Isn't it? And it's one I think we need to unpack a bit further. But my hunch is the answer lies somewhere in the balance between Katie's optimism and those harsh realities she has to face. It's in that tension, that struggle, that we might actually find the real meaning of hope.
Ooh, I like that.
Okay.
Okay, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back to continue unraveling this.
It's like finding beauty in unexpected places, That contrast almost becomes a statement in itself.
Right.
Okay.
And speaking of beauty, the review mentioned some interesting visual motifs that tie into those bigger themes we were discussing.
Okay.
Like the dusty, isolated landscape and the muted color palette. What do you make of those choices?
Well, those elements work together to create this feeling of isolation, both physical and emotional.
Right.
Those muted colors, almost like a faded photograph, they could symbolize how hope and vibrancy are being drained from Katie's world.
Interesting. It's like the environment is a reflection of what's going on inside her.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder if the director is intentionally playing with color symbolism.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Are there any specific colors that stand out to you in the review?
Well, the review doesn't go into specifics about individual colors, but that emphasis on a muted palette
Right.
definitely suggests a lack of warmth and vitality.
Right.
Think about what colors like grays and browns represent,
Yeah.
decay, stagnation, a sense of being stuck.
Right.
And that could be a visual representation of how trapped Katie feels.
Yeah, like she's living in this world that's literally losing its color,
Right.
which mirrors her own internal state.
Exactly. And that contrast between her internal optimism
Right.
and the external reality, that's where I think the film finds its power.
Yeah.
It's not a simple story of despair.
Right.
It's this complex exploration of what it means to be human and to hold on to hope even when things are tough.
Right. It brings us back to Bruno and how his past might be impacting their relationship.
Okay.
The reviewer doesn't give us a ton of details about his backstory.
Right.
But what can we infer from these descriptions of his intensity and guarded vulnerability?
Well, to me, those descriptions suggest a character who's been deeply wounded, someone who's struggling to open himself up to love because he's afraid of being hurt again.
That makes sense.
That intensity could be a defense mechanism,
Right.
a way to keep people at a distance.
To protect himself.
Exactly. But there's also that vulnerability suggesting a longing for connection.
It's like he wants it, but he's scared of it at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes me think of that idea of the wounded healer.
Oh, yeah.
Bruno, despite his own pain, is drawn to Katie's optimism because he sees in her a reflection of the hope that he's lost.
That's a really interesting take. I like that.
It's like they could potentially heal each other.
Right. It's not just a romantic connection. That's
Yeah.
a shared journey of healing.
It's about empathy and compassion, even when you're hurting yourself,
Exactly.
which ties back into those big themes we were discussing earlier. Hope, resilience, self-worth.
Right.
The review mentions them, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on how they might be woven into the narrative.
Well, Katie's pursuit of her dream, despite all the obstacles,
Yeah.
that speaks to the power of resilience. It's not about whether she actually gets to San Francisco.
Right.
It's about her strength in the face of adversity.
It's a fight.
Exactly. That's what makes her character so inspiring.
And her journey also seems to be about searching for her own self-worth.
Oh, absolutely. She's stuck in this cycle that's diminishing her sense of value.
Right.
And her escape to San Francisco represents this yearning for something more.
Right. Like she wants to define herself on her own terms.
Exactly. And breaking free from that destructive environment can be a powerful act of self-love.
It's like saying, I deserve better.
Yes, exactly.
This film is raising so many questions about what it means to be human. you know?
It is.
It's not just a story about this young woman trying to escape her circumstances. It's a commentary on hope, resilience, and the search for meaning in a world that often feels indifferent to our struggles.
You're hitting on something really important here. That setting, the Arizona desert, it could be seen as a metaphor for the existential void. This vast empty space that reflects our human search for meaning and purpose.
That's brilliant. It takes the film to a whole other level.
Right.
It's not just a physical journey.
It's a spiritual one, too.
It's about confronting those big questions about existence.
Exactly. And her optimism, her belief in a brighter future that becomes an act of defiance against that despair.
It's a reminder that we have the power to choose hope.
Even when things feel meaningless.
Right. It makes me think about the title, Katie Says Goodbye.
Yeah.
Is it just a literal goodbye to a place?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it a deeper farewell to a way of life, a mindset,
right.
maybe even a part of herself that she needs to let go of?
That's a powerful question, and it speaks to those layers of symbolism that we see throughout the film.
Right.
That goodbye could be interpreted on multiple levels.
It adds to the richness of the story.
Exactly. It's not just a departure, it's a transformation.
The reviewer also mentions that the film might not be for everyone, that some viewers might find it too bleak or intense.
Yeah, I can see that. It's definitely not a lighthearted watch.
Right.
It's a deep dive into some pretty dark aspects of human experience.
But for those who are willing to go there,
I think it offers a really profound and ultimately rewarding experience.
It sounds like the film's strength lies in its honesty.
Yeah.
It doesn't sugarcoat anything, but it also doesn't just dwell on the negative.
Yeah, exactly. It finds that balance between acknowledging the darkness and celebrating the resilience of the human spirit.
It's about finding those glimmers of hope.
Even in the midst of suffering.
Right. And I think that's where we find the real beauty of being human.
Absolutely.
It sounds like Katie Says Goodbye is a film that will stick with you.
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
It's one that makes you think and reflect.
It leaves you with a deeper understanding of yourself and the world.
I love that. And speaking of journeys, the reviewer mentions that the ending is open-ended.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which leaves the viewers to wonder about Katie's fate. What do you make of that choice? I think it's a really smart way to keep the audience engaged. By not tying everything up in a neat little bow, the filmmakers are inviting us to keep thinking about the story.
To come to our own conclusions.
Exactly. It's like real life, We don't always get clear-cut answers.
It's messy.
It is. And it's in that mess that we figure out who we are.
This is bringing up so many thoughts about the deeper layers of the film.
Like what?
Hold the desert. Katie's dream, Bruno's vulnerability, they all seem to point to this larger allegory about the human condition.
I think you're right on the money. The film's elements, both visual and narrative, they can be seen as metaphors for the challenges we all face.
Right.
The desert, for example, could represent those times when we feel lost and alone.
Like emotionally barren.
Exactly. And Katie's yearning for escape, that could reflect our own desires for something better,
For something more.
Yeah. Her journey becomes this universal metaphor for the human search for meaning and purpose.
And the fact that there are no easy answers makes it even more powerful.
I agree.
It's a reminder that life is unpredictable.
It is.
But even in the face of uncertainty, we have the power to choose hope.
And to keep striving for a better future.
And that's a powerful message to leave with our listeners.
It is. Katie Says Goodbye might not give us all the answers.
Right.
But it reminds us that we're not alone in our struggles.
It's a testament to the human spirit and its capacity for hope, even when things are really tough.
Exactly. It's almost like the film itself is this vast desert open to interpretation, and we're just wandering through it trying to find our own meaning.
I love that. And it really speaks to how film can spark those really personal journeys.
Right.
Katie Says Goodbye is more than just a movie. It's like a prompt for introspection.
Totally.
It makes you think about your own ideas about hope and resilience.
For sure. It's like art becomes this Rorschach test,
Whoa, yeah.
What we see in the film, what it makes us feel, it reflects our own experiences.
Their own definitions of hope and despair.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes storytelling so powerful. Right. It connects us to something bigger than ourselves.
Right. Katie Says Goodbye, with its realism and symbolism, its themes, and that open ending. It's like holding up a mirror to what it means to be human.
I'm curious about the surrealism that's mentioned in the review.
Okay.
The reviewer talks about these dreamlike sequences, suggesting that maybe the director's playing with our perception of reality a bit.
Yeah.
What do you think those surreal elements add to the film's message?
Well, I think they could represent Katie's internal state, blurring those lines between her hopes and the reality of her situation.
Right.
Imagine like a scene where the desert just melts into the streets of San Francisco.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Or a scene where Bruno's past traumas are these ghostly figures haunting their relationship.
It's like the director is taking those internal struggles and making them visual.
Exactly. It's a way to explore those deeper parts of the psyche, the subconscious.
The parts that we don't always understand.
Right. And by combining surrealism with that gritty realism,
right,
the film creates this really unique atmosphere, that unsettling feeling.
Yeah, one that reflects how complex her journey is.
This film is operating on so many levels.
It is.
Psychological, social, existential.
Right. It's not just about Katie's quest for a better life. It's about what it means to be human.
It really is, and I think that's what makes it so compelling.
I agree. It's not giving us easy answers.
Right.
It's making us confront those big questions about life and hope and meaning.
It's forcing us to lean into the ambiguity.
To sit with the questions.
Yeah, and not cling to those easy answers.
And maybe in that process of questioning, we discover something new about ourselves.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. Katie Says Goodbye is definitely a film that stays with you.
It does.
It makes you think and reflect long after it's over.
It's a testament to the power of storytelling, to illuminate the human experience.
So to our listener, we encourage you to seek out Katie Says Goodbye.
Yeah.
Go on your own journey through the film's landscapes and themes.
Who knows what you might discover about yourself?
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep embracing the power of stories.
And the power of art to inspire and connect us.